Hello, everyone, and welcome again to another Teacher Joseph podcast. Today, we're talking about motivation and learning. Did you know that the number one reason why people stop learning a language is because of lack of motivation? Especially for people who are learning alone. If you pay a lot of money to a language school or even to a teacher, that in itself is motivating because it opens up your mind to the possibility of getting something back for the money that you've paid. But if you simply sit at a desk every day, staring at English books and wondering, I'm not really connecting with these, then you may have a problem with motivation. For those of you who know me, you know that I believe motivation is something which is always there. You were motivated to listen to this podcast. You were motivated to get out of bed this morning. You were motivated to have a coffee or a tea. And I'm sure later you'll be motivated to switch on the computer or the TV or the skybox or your iPad or iPod to hear something. That's motivation. And that proves to me that motivation is always present. So it's not about there being no motivation. It's about not being able to feel motivation. You can't hear the radio until you turn on the device, and then you realize that radio signals are all around you. Whether the device is on or off, there's things, your Wi-Fi router, your radio transmitter, there's all kinds of things broadcasting to you, at you, in you, and around you. And the motivation is a little bit like that. You have to tune in order to pick it up. There is a book called Motivating Learning by a Hungarian man called Zoltán Dornier, and it's co-authored by Jill Hadfield. Zoltán and Jill tell us that the best way to approach motivation in language learning is to imagine our ideal future language self. And they argue that if students have a rich and inspiring vision of themselves as successful future language learners and users, they will be motivated to work hard to actualize the vision and become that learner. That reminds me of a very old British song. There was a very old British song called "Where Do You Go To, My Lovely?" And it's about a man who's pining for love, and he's singing about a woman that he was involved with in the past. I think they were actually childhood friends. And then she leaves and becomes the ambassador of France, I think. It's a really crazy song. And the song says, "Where did you go to, my lovely? Remember the back streets of Naples, and now you get racehorses for Christmas, and you socialize with rich and famous people." It's a very interesting song. It's by Peter Sarsted. "Where Do You Go To, My Lovely?" by Peter Sarsted. If you're looking for something to smile at today, I recommend that you find that song. Anyway, my point is that these two authors are putting forward the idea that to motivate yourself, you should think about your ideal future language self. I'm not really sure how that works for me, but it might work for you if you can imagine what the end result of your English might be. So where exactly do you want to get to? And if you can keep that in the forefront of your mind, what that looks like, then you have a better chance of succeeding. Now, personally speaking, I don't really feel that kind of motivation helps. Oh, I want to be president of the United States. Oh, why am I still not motivated? Or perhaps they're talking about more real motivations, about where we want to be. Life isn't like that. Sometimes we don't have those kinds of decisions, and most of us have very vague ideas of who we want to be in the future, but perhaps not fixed ideas. I do agree, though, with these two authors that perhaps imagining your ideal future language learning rather than imagining your ideal future language self might be a better idea. So, for example, let me just give you a brief kind of example on this because I think it's important. So, when you work in an office, let's say that you work for a bank, okay, it's the best example I can think of right now. You're working for a bank, and that bank and your job there really becomes your identity. You get up in the morning, you put on the fancy clothes because you have to look good or at least look smart. You have the long raincoat, the umbrella, fancy shoes. You can afford to drive to work or get a cab. On public transport, of course, you feel like you're contributing, you're doing something for the bank. You feel like you've managed to forge an identity for yourself around your job. As you get older, that identity becomes very entrenched. And if you want evidence of that, be off work for 1 month. Because by the end of the month, you feel completely different. You've maybe identified different projects you want to get involved with. You no longer have that hard edge that gets up at 7 a.m., battles through traffic to get to work by 9. When that's taken away, you aren't left with very much, and you find that you have to rebuild your identity in other ways. Now, when you bring language learning into that identity, let's say you're still working for that bank, okay? So now you're working for the bank and you also want to have the identity of a student. That first identity doesn't allow you to do that very well. In fact, your first identity will say, what? A student? I don't need this. After all, I'm earning a good amount of money. Let me just buy English. It's easier. And then everyone can hear me speak. So you rush out, you buy the course, English in 3 months, or you rush away and you get Duolingo. And this voice in your head is still saying, wow, I can do English. That's who I am. I work for a bank. And by the end of this, you find that you really have a lot of problems learning because learning can't be bought. English can't just be bought over the counter and put into your head. It requires a discipline. And this comes as a really big shock for some people. So there's others who are then wanting to learn English. They make time in their career, let's say from the bank, to learn, and they still feel that they're not really getting anywhere. And the reason for that is because they haven't really allowed enough space for this new identity to shape itself. So it's kind of like, well, this is what I do when I'm at home. Nobody needs to know how I do it. And there's still this idea in the background that if you just buy lots of lessons, English is going to come. And of course, we all know, because we've all tried this, it doesn't quite work that way. It takes a reshaping of your personality. It can take a lot of humility to let other people into your life to practice with, such as language partners. If you're looking for British people, you might find a British club or an English-speaking club around you. You'll definitely find English people in any Irish pub or British pub that exists in your country. It takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of pushing to find people who are a match for you when it comes to language learning. And then, of course, there's making time for things like the essays and grammar. And that's the easy part, because if you come from a kind of environment like working in a bank or working in finance, you're accustomed to the spreadsheets. You're accustomed to writing things out. So the grammar is relatively easy, but then you still wonder, why can't I talk? What is it with me that I'm not really talking enough? And again, it's about breaking down that identity or letting yourself go enough in order for a new identity to come in, kind of like partitioning a hard drive. So today I'd like you to take a few moments just to consider your future language self and your future language learning self. What does he or she look like? What habits does he have? What things does he do or she do every day that motivates him? And ultimately, if you can, picture your future self with really where you want to be with English and how far away is that from where you are now. It might involve some kind of geographical move if you're thinking of moving country, but you need to first envisage that. You have to picture it in your mind. But a good place to start is picturing in your mind what a good, motivated language learner looks like. And if you can imagine yourself in that place, just picture it for a moment. See yourself in that place, sitting with your books, talking to language exchange partners, English clubs, English people. Just imagine what that looks like. Maybe write it down and it'll give you a better idea of exactly what you're aiming for. And that in itself is quite motivating. Right, this book, which I referred to earlier, Motivating Learning by Zoltan Dornier and Jill Hadfield, you might find it somewhere, but the site that I'm looking at is asking for £43 for a copy. And I have to say, it doesn't look very big. Well, 320 pages, I suppose, is big. That's how many pages there are, but £42? Maybe as an academic book, it might be something you can access at university. It does actually have many, many activities in it. So it's definitely worth having a look at if you can find it somewhere. But £43 for a book? Well, remember as well, it is written for academics, so it's not an easy read, but still a very good book. Right, that's it from me. I hope you enjoy your day wherever you are, and talk again soon.